Hi, Martha. This so nice to see you. So you're Martha. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Martha Magelsdorf, and I'm a member of New Bedford Friends Meeting, and I'm the recording clerk there.
So Friends meeting, meaning Quaker,
Quaker Meeting, yeah,
and they still exist.
we do, and we don't just wear black and gray anymore. We're a little bit different than most of the stereotype of Quakers.
Okay, it's not the man on the cereal box.
No, hasn't been that way for a while.
All
Thank
right,
God.
right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the journey that Quakers have taken. Um, there's quite a few meetings in the area, and most of them are open and affirming. But with New Bedford meeting, you're a historic meeting, as most of them are in some senses, but you really have quite a history there. And so when did you guys become open and affirming? When did you go through the process, and what was the outcome of that?
Okay, that's a great question, Andy. And I have a kind of a funny answer, which is that we did it long enough ago that I couldn't easily find out the answer to when we did it. It was Quakers in New England started doing a lot of discerning around same-sex marriage, starting, I know as far back as the 1980s, one of the meetings in New England was performing same-sex marriages. And the meetings started discerning about that a lot in the 1990s. And what I know is that by the early 2000s, New Bedford meeting was clear on the issue of same-sex marriage in terms of being welcoming to LGBTQ couples, individuals in general. That, oh gosh, that goes back further, probably to the, I can't tell you the exact dates, the 1980s or so. Quakers have been wrestling with these issues for a while. I know that a Quaker activist I know came out at a Quaker conference in 1973 in a big keynote speech. So, and I know that there were Quakers, but there was a gay Quaker who was a leader in the regional New England body in the 1960s. So we've been working on it for a while.
And we had Bayard Rustin. So
That's right. Although Quakers were, when Bayard Rustin was working, Quakers had not yet.
they're still
They
struggling.
were not open and affirming. They were kind of working through those issues. It was early for them on that. So.
Wonderful. Now, I have to be honest that I did get married in your meeting.
Oh.
So, and it was a beautiful service, and it was a balm to us to be allowed to be married in 2004 at the New Bedford meeting. It will always be a special place for me. But that being said, what is a typical Quaker meeting like? I think a lot of people may not know the experience. Can you describe it for us?
I'm sorry?
Can you describe it?
Sure. Now, I want to give this a caveat that there are all kinds of styles of Quaker worship in the world, and a Quaker meeting in Quaker service in Africa would be maybe quite different, and some Quaker meetings have pastors. We follow the traditional older form of Quaker worship that doesn't have a pastor, and so a Quaker meeting of this type is an adventure. You don't know what is going to happen when you come in. We come together in silence with the idea. The way I like to describe it is it's like every individual has kind of like a lousy cell phone connection to God, the potential to hear God, but not all that well. So we come together to kind of silence all the distractions and all the noise that goes on in our mind and in the world around us, to try to listen to that voice within us that is the spirit. And to get in touch with the divine energy that runs through creation. And our belief is that, and our experience, it's not like a belief in your head. It's my experience when I go to worship on Sunday, is that sometimes people will be moved by that divine energy to give a particular message to the group, to the meeting gathered there. And that can be an amazing experience. I still remember the first time I was in a big Quaker meeting and somebody spoke exactly what I needed to hear. And that does happen in good Quaker meetings. It's some Sundays are better than others, right? But we all have our moments. But basically, we come together in silence to listen for the voice of the divine, and to discern it together and to hear whatever message is meant for us. So it is sometimes said that in a traditional Quaker meeting that there are no ministers, but that's really not true. It's that we all have the capability to be ministers, and we just don't know whose ministry is going to be needed on that particular day.
Again, I have to say that I was a youth group leader in a different church, and I brought about 12 kids, high school kids, maybe 15, 16 years old, to the New Bedford meeting. And an older woman had a leading that morning to bring her bio. She didn't know we were coming. And here we were sitting there. And she stood up and she read out of the silence her story about being 17 and deciding to be a Quaker. And I thought, oh boy.
Well, that's a good Quaker meeting experience. Sounds like it was a good day.
Wow. And just everyone was kind of like, how did that happen? And no prompting, no nothing. So, and then the other piece of it is governance. A lot of churches have hierarchy. Quakers do not.
Yeah, we make decisions in a really interesting way. It takes a little getting used to, but we make we make decisions with something that we call sense of the meeting, which is it's similar to the secular idea of consensus, although it's a little bit different. But basically, we have the members and regular attenders of the meeting get together once a month to do our business together, and we have a person who we call a clerk, whose job it is to facilitate that meeting, which is to kind of make sure that people don't talk over each other, that there's space between when people talk, and that we're all really listening. Our belief is that when we do business right, and we don't always get this right, that when we do it right, that it too is a kind of worship, that we're listening for what does the Spirit want us to do together. And the belief is that if we really listen hard enough, that we can come into a place of unity, and that place of unity is where God is. Now, it doesn't always work so beautifully in practice, but that's the idea.
The other interesting thing about Quakerism is that the role of women has been, when Quakerism started in 1660s.
1650s, yep.
And women have had voice, have been seen as equals from day one.
That is right. George Fox, who was the leader of the Quaker movement in the 17th century in England, was really what we would call today a feminist. I mean, I don't think that word existed then, so he isn't known by those kinds of words, but he was incredibly focused, as one of the many things he was focused on empowering women, and he recognized women as spiritual equals. And there's some wonderful letters he wrote, which, if you've ever felt oppressed as a woman, they're great to read, although they're in 16th century language, because he not only stands up for women and their right to preach, but he condemns anyone who wants to prevent them from doing that, which was basically all of Western civilization at that point. So he wasn't afraid to take a stance on behalf of women. There's a wonderful pamphlet from, I think it's from the mid 1660s, by Margaret Fell, who was one of Fox's early converts, and they married. She was a co-leader of the movement, called Women Speaking Justified, which is a wonderful biblical argument for women preaching. If you know anybody who's in a religious organization that hasn't figured out that that's a good thing yet, I'm happy to lend you a copy of this pamphlet. But yeah, women have long been empowered in the religious society since the beginning, and there have been women ministers since the 17th century. And importantly, in America, many of the early leaders of the women's rights movements were disproportionately Quaker. Like Seneca Falls Convention, most of the women there were brought up Quaker. Because Quaker women had their own business meetings, and they were empowered to speak in public, in other words, in Quaker meetings and groups. And so they were well equipped to take leadership positions at a time when most women did not have those experiences. Excellent.
Now, your meeting house has more history than most. You are the Whaling Quakers, correct?
Yep.
Also, Frederick Douglass was the Quakers from the New Bedford meeting helped Frederick Douglass come to New Bedford.
Yes, probably the thing our meeting is best known for is the best known for is that two members of New Bedford meeting assisted Frederick Douglass when he was trying to get to New Bedford. He encountered them in Newport, and in those days Quakers did wear very distinctive clothing, so he knew they were Quakers, and he knew that Quakers of the time were anti-slavery, and so he approached them, and they explained to him how to get to New Bedford and where to go to the Johnson's house, which is around the corner from the meeting house.
That's amazing.
And yes, the Quakers were very involved in the whaling. That's something that is a much more complicated legacy in terms of obviously the terrible impact on whales that whaling has had.
Right, but kind of known in New Bedford as, you know, they were a lot of the ship owners and things like that. So yes,
yep.
Yeah. So yeah, and your building is phenomenal. It's 1820, am I correct?
That's right. It was completed in 1822. It's the second Quaker meeting on that site. The original Quaker meeting was built in the 18th century and has been moved right around the corner when the new building was built. Newer building was completed in 1822, I believe.
Excellent. Now, there's other affirming Quaker meetings in the area. So
yes. Yes, and there are lots of wonderful Quaker meetings in this area. Dartmouth was settled by Quakers, and so there are lots of Quaker meetings around. There's Allen's Neck meeting in Dartmouth, which is a great meeting. There's Westport meeting, and there's Mattapoisett meeting, and those are all great and affirming and welcoming meetings.
Yes, wonderful.
And I should say that that our regional group, which is called New England Yearly Meeting, is also an affirming and welcoming community.
Working towards justice and simplicity and equality and peace. So
yeah, equality is a long time what we call a Quaker testimony.
Could you explain some of the spice testimony that we call?
Sure. Quaker testimonies are ways that Quakers are supposed to be in the world, basically. They're sort of things that we think are really important. And they're often described in a contemporary way. Someone has come up with the acronym for SPICE, which is simplicity, peace, integrity, community, and equality.
Excellent. It's not the Spice Girls, it's the Spice meeting.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Excellent. So, and your personal journey. How did you come to Quakerism, and how did you come to sort of this open and affirming position?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. I was born a Quaker, so that I didn't have a whole lot of control over. My parents were Quakers. My first Quaker meeting was on Cape Cod when I was about 3 or 4 months old, and I cried. But my mother told me as a child that she was very embarrassed by this, and she looked up and saw that all the little old ladies in the meeting were smiling because they were happy to have a baby Quaker. And so I've always felt very welcome at Quaker meetings ever since then. And in terms of journey to being an open and affirming and welcoming Quaker, I think that is really generational and part of my Quaker upbringing. I can remember, this is going to date me, but I remember I was in high school in the 1970s, and my mother was working for a Quaker meeting in Philadelphia at that time. As kind of the office administrator. And I remember her coming home and talking to me about a Quaker activist who had come out to talk to them about gay and lesbian rights. And she was kind of thinking about it. And she started musing about the idea of same-sex marriage. She didn't use those words and thought it would be an okay thing. And so I kind of grew up in that environment, and so it's not, as I came to Quakerism, I grew up in it as a child, stopped going, came as a young adult, and there were always openly gay and lesbian people in my meetings, and that was just part of what my experience was. So it didn't occur to me to be anything else, and but it's no particular credit to me. And I personally experienced a lot of I've experienced God working in many ways through people in the LGBTQ community. So that's just something that is, uh, yeah, just been very true in my life.
Excellent. Now, how are you guys worshiping during the COVID experience? How?
Yeah, well, it's complicated, isn't it? Well, it turns out that Quaker worship actually works surprisingly well on Zoom. I was really skeptical about this, and I'm the person who set up our Zoom account, and I host the meetings because I figured we kind of had to, it wasn't a good idea, even though we have a very large space. It didn't seem to be a good idea to be, meeting just meeting as a big group in person. So our space is big enough and our community is small enough that we have had some people, a very small group, just like 2 or 3 people who've been meeting physically in the building with social distancing and so forth. And then we've also had a Zoom meeting for worship. And we try to keep in touch with each other about what's going on with those two. But the Zoom it's not as good as being in person, but it's not bad. I've been pleasantly surprised. We had, during Zoom meeting for worship this past Sunday, a couple of us were in backyards and I forgot to mute my microphone. So the bird song was like going across different people's experience. They were hearing birds from different places, and that became part of a message that someone gave, and it was quite lovely. So it's not ideal, but it's probably easier for us to do that kind of form of worship than it is for many religious organizations.
Now, how can people find you? You're on Spring Street on.
That's right, 83 Spring Street, the corner of Spring and 7th. Yep. And we are in the process of hashing out our plans for what's safe for us to be doing in terms of physical meeting. There was a meeting just yesterday with faith leaders in New Bedford, in the city of New Bedford, public health folks via Zoom, which somebody else in our meeting went to, so I have to find out what we learned. So if you're interested in coming in the short term, probably the best thing to do is just ping us on our Facebook page, and I will get back to you, or somebody else will get back to you and give you directions to our Zoom link, or tell us if our hope is that we can be meeting this summer, maybe outside, but we'll figure that out in the next couple weeks.
I know the other meetings are meeting by Zoom as well, so it's an interesting experience, and I know for my meeting it works very well. So too. So
yeah, it's also a great chance to visit other meetings too, if anybody.
there you go, without driving. So this will be for Pride, and is there anything that you'd like to say to the LGBT plus community for the month of June? Just
we'll just have a wonderful Pride celebration. We're sorry that we can't be with you in Buttonwood Park. That's been a very joyful experience the last 2 years, and just don't listen to anybody who says hateful things about you in the name of God. It's not true. It's wrong, and they're mistaken. Love you.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great thing. So what's your Facebook? So if people want to get in contact, what's the Facebook address?
Let me just get the exact, if you look for New Bedford, let me just get the exact page for you so that I have it right in front of me. I think it's New Bedford Friends Meeting, but let me check exactly what New Bedford Friends Meeting. Yep.
Great. So they can contact people through the New Bedford Friends Meeting Facebook page.
You can message us. Yep.
Great. And is there a phone number that someone could reach out to? Or is it just best to go through the Facebook page?
I think the Facebook page is probably the easiest right now because we don't have the phone in our building set up to forward, so it would probably take a few days for someone to get back to you.
Okay, great. And the other affirming meetings are New Mattapoisett Friends Meeting, Westport Friends Meeting, and Allen's Neck, which is in Dartmouth.
That's right.
Friends Meeting. So any one of those people would be welcome, and so great. I really appreciate your time, and happy Pride.
Thank you, and happy Pride to you, Andy, as well. And thank you for the conversation. It's been lovely.
My pleasure. All right.